Welcome to Conwy Castle. It's a very huge castle in north of Wales. I want to go inside, but I wonder if I can. I have no time, but we'll see. So join me.
Conwy Castle is a fortification in Conwy, located in North Wales. It was built by Edward I during his conquest of Wales between 1283 and 1289. Constructed as a part of a wider project to create the walled town of Conwy, the combined defenses cost around £15,000, a huge sum of money for the period. Over the next few centuries, the castle played an important part in several wars. It withstood the siege of Mad Dog Ap, Llywelyn in the winter of 1294 until 95. Acted as a temporary haven for Richard II in 1399 and was held for several months by forces loyal to Owain Glyndwr in 1401. Following the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642, the castle was held by forces loyal to Charles I, holding out until 1646 when it surrendered to the parliamentary armies. In the aftermath, the castle was partially slighted by Parliament to prevent it being used in any further revolt and was finally completely ruined in 1665 when its remaining iron and lead was stripped and sold off. Conwy Castle became an attractive destination for painters in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Visitors' numbers grew and initial restoration work was carried out in the second half of the 19th century. In the 21st century, the ruined castle is managed by Caddo as a tourist attraction. UNESCO considers Conwy to be one of the finest examples of the late 13th century and early 14th century military architecture in Europe, and it is classed as a World Heritage Site. The rectangular castle is built from local and imported stone and occupies a coastal ridge, originally overlooking an important crossing point over the River Conwy, divided into an inner and an outer ward. It is defended by 8 large towers and 2 barbicans with a postern gate leading down to the river, allowing the castle to be resupplied from the sea. It retains the earliest surviving stone, matriculations in Britain, and what historian Jeremy Asby has described as the best preserved suite of medieval private royal chambers in England and Wales. In keeping with the other Edwardian castles in North Wales, the architecture of Conwy has close links to that found in the Kingdom of Savoy during the same period, an influence probably derived from the Savoy origins of the main architect, James of St. George. During the 13th century, before the English built the town of Conwy, Aberconwy Abbey, the site was occupied by a Cistercian monastery favored by the Welsh prince, as well as location in one of the palaces called Lees of the Welsh prince from Conwy. The old structure is a part of the town walls at the southern end of the east side. Here one wall of the Tower of Lees, belonging to Llywelyn the Great, and his grandson Llywelyn ap Gruffydd have been incorporated into the wall. Built on a rocky outcrop with an apsidal tower, it is a classic native Welsh build and stand out from the rest of the town walls due to the presence of 4 window openings. It dates from the early 13th century, and it is the most complete remnant of any of his leaves. The location also controlled an important crossing point over the River of Conwy between the coastal and inland areas of North Wales that the Conwy Castle for many years had defended. The kings of England and the Welsh prince had vied for control of the region since 1070s, and the conflict has resumed during 13th century, leading to Edward I intervening and the North Wales for the second time during his reign in 1282. Edward invaded a huge army pushing north from Carmarthen and westwards from Montgomery and Chester. Edward captured Aberconwy in March 1283 and decided that the location would form a center of a new county. He would relocate the abbey 8 miles up the Conwy Valley to a new site of Mainan, establishing Mainan Abbey, and build a new English castle and walled town of the monastery's former site. The ruined castle of Deganwy was abandoned and never rebuilt. Edward's plan was a colonial enterprise, and placing the new town and walls on top of such a high-status native Welsh site was in part of a symbolic act to demonstrate English power. Work began on cutting the ditch around Conwy Castle within days of Edward's decision. The work was controlled by Sir John von Villars and overseen by Master Mason James of St. George. And the first phase of work between 1283 and 1284 focused on creating the exterior curtain walls and towers. And the second phase from 1284 and 1286, the interior buildings were erected, while work began on the walls for the neighboring town. By 1287, the castle was complete. The builders recruited huge numbers of laborers from across England for the task. At each summer building season, the laborers massed at Chester and then walked into Wales. Edward's accountants did not separate the cost of the town walls from that of the castle, but the total cost of the two projects came to around £15,000, a huge sum for the period. The castle's constable was, by a royal charter of 1284, also the mayor of the new town of Conwy. To this day, the mayor is ex officio constable of the castle and oversaw a castle garrison of 30 soldiers, including 15 crossbowmen, supported by a carpenter, chaplain, blacksmith, engineer, and a stonemason. The first constable of the castle was Sir William de Seacon, who had previously been the first constable of Broodland Castle. In 1294, Madog ap Llywelyn rebelled against English rule. Edward was besieged at Conwy by the Welsh between December and January 1295, supplied only by sea, before forces arrived to relieve him in February. Chronicler Walter of Gisborough suggested that given the austere conditions, Edward refused to drink his own private supply of wine and instead had it shared out amongst the garrison. For some years afterwards, the castle formed the main residence for visiting senior figures and hosted Edward's son, the future Edward II, in 1301, when he visited the region to receive homage from the Welsh leaders. Between 14th and 15th centuries, Conwy Castle was not well maintained during the early 14th century, and by 1321 a survey reported it was poorly equipped, with limited stores and suffering from leaking roofs and rotten timbers. These problems persisted until Edward the Black Prince took over control of the castle in 1343. Sir John Weston, his chamberlain, conducted repairs, building new stone support arches for the Great Hall and other parts of the castle. After the death of the Black Prince, however, Conwy fell into neglect again. At the end of the 14th century, the castle was used as a refuge by Richard II from the forces of his rival, Henry Bolingbroke. On 12 August 1399, after returning from Ireland, Richard made his way to the castle, where he met Bolingbroke's emissary, Henry Percy, for negotiations. Percy swore in the chapel he would not harm the king. On 19 August, Richard surrendered to Percy at Flint Castle, promising to abdicate if his life were spared. The king was then taken to London and died later in captivity at Pontecraft Castle. Henry Bolingbroke took the English throne to rule as Henry IV in 1400. but rebellion broke out in North Wales shortly afterwards under the leadership of Owain Glyndwr. In March 1401, Rhys ap Tudor and his brother Gwilym, cousins of Owain Glyndwr, overtook a surprise attack on Conwy Castle, pretending to be carpenters repairing the castle. The two gained entry, killed the two watchmen on duty, and took control of the fortress. Welsh rebels then attacked and captured the rest of the walled town. The brothers held out for around 3 months before negotiating a surrender. As a part of this agreement, the pair were given a royal pardon by Henry. During the War of the Roses between 1455 and 1485, fought by the rival factions of the Lancastrians and the Yorkists, Conwy was reinforced but played little part in the fighting. Henry VIII conducted restoration work in 1530s, during the time the castle was being used as a prison, a depot, and a potential residence for visitors.
Look at these guys. We are on the top of the castle. Well, not the highest, but you could see the background. It's beautiful. And they build a modern bridge within the castle, connecting, and it's beautiful. And we're going to turn you around. Look at this amazing, huge castle behind me. It's a contrast, but you could see the castle. Beautiful.
During the 17th and 21st centuries, Conwy Castle fell into despair again. By the early 17th century, Charles I sold it to Edward Conwy in 1627 for £100, and Edward's son, also called Edward, inherited the ruin in 1631. In 1642, the English Civil War broke out between the Charles royalist supporters and Parliament. John Williams, the Archbishop of York, took charge of the castle on behalf of the king and set about repairing and garrisoning it at his own expense. In 1645, Sir John Owen was appointed governor of the castle instead. However, leading to a bitter dispute between the two men, the Archbishop defected to Parliament. The town of Conwy fell in August 1646, and in November, General Thomas Myton finally took the castle itself, a substantial siege. The Trevor family petitioned Myton for the return of property in the castle that they had lent to the Archbishop. In the aftermath of the siege, Colonel John Carter was appointed governor of the castle, and fresh repairs were carried out. And in 1655, the Council of State appointed by Parliament ordered the castle to be slighted or put beyond military use. The bakehouse tower was probably deliberately partially pulled down at this time as a part of the slighting. With the restoration of Charles II in 1660, Conwy was returned to Edward Conwy, the Earl of Conwy, but 5 years later, Edward decided to strip the remaining iron and lead from the castle and sell it off. The work was completed under the supervision of Edward Conwy's overseer, William Millward, despite opposition from the leading citizens of Conwy, and turned the castle into a total ruin. By the end of the 18th century, the ruins were considered picturesque and sublime, attracting visitors and artists, and paintings of the castle were made by Thomas Girton, Moses Griffith, Julius Caesar Evertson, Paul Sandby, and J.M.W. Turner. Several bridges were built across the River Conwy, linking the town and Llandudno during the 19th century, including a road bridge in 1826 and rail bridge in 1848. These improved communication links with the castle and further increased tourist numbers. In 1865, Conwy Castle passed from the Holland family, who had leased it from the descendants of the Conways, to the civic leadership of Conwy Town. Restoration work on the ruins then began, including the reconstruction of the damaged bakehouse tower. In 1953, the castle was leased to the Ministry of Works, and Arnold Taylor undertook a wide range of repairs and extensive research into the castle's history. An additional road bridge was built to the castle in 1958, already protected by a scheduled monument. In 1986, it was also declared part of the World Heritage Site of the castles and town walls of King Edward and Gwynedd. And during the 21st century, the castle is managed by Caddo as a tourist attraction, and 186,897 tourists visited the castle in 2010. A new visitor center was opened in 2012. The castle requires ongoing maintenance and repairs, cost £30,000 over the 2002 and 2003 financial year. The castle has a rocky coastal ridge of grey sandstone and limestone, and much of the stone from the castle is largely taken from the ridge itself. Probably when the site was first cleared, the local stone was not sufficient quality to be used for carving details such as windows, however, and accordingly sandstone was brought in from the Cruden Peninsula, Chester, and the Wirral. This sandstone was more colorful than the local grey stone and was probably deliberately chosen for its appearance. The castle has a rectangular plan and is divided into inner and outer wards, separated by a cross wall with 4 large 70-foot or 21 meters tall towers on its side. Originally, the castle would have been whitewashed using lime render. The outside of the towers still have the putlogs holes from the original construction, where timbers were inserted to create a spiraling ramp for the builders. Although now somewhat decayed, the battlements originally sported triple finial designs and featured a sequence of square holes running along the outside of the walls. It is uncertain that these holes were used for. They may have been drainage holes, supports for defensive hoarding, or for displaying ornamental shields. The main entrance of the castle is through the western barbican, an exterior defense in front of the main gate. When the first built, the barbican was reached over a drawbridge and a masonry ramp that came up sharply from the town below. The modern path cuts east along the outside of the walls. The barbican features the earliest surviving stone machicolations in Britain, and the gate would originally have been protected by a portcullis. The gate leads to the outer ward, which, when first built, would have been full of various administrative and service buildings. The northwest tower was reached through the porter's lodge and contained limited accommodation and space for stores. The southwest tower may have been used either for the castle's constable or by the castle's garrison, and also contained a bakehouse. On the south side of the ward is a range of buildings that included the Great Hall and Chapel, sitting on top of the cellars, which are now exposed. The stubs and one surviving stone arches from the 1340s can still be seen. Behind the Great Hall was the tower used by the constable for detaining prisoners. This included a special room for holding prisoners called Debtor's Chamber in the 16th century, and an underground dungeon. On the north side of the ward was a range of service buildings, including a kitchen, brewhouse, and bakehouse, backed onto the kitchen tower, containing accommodation and storerooms. The inner ward was originally separated from the outer ward by an internal wall, a drawbridge and a gate protected by a ditch cut into the rock. The ditch was filled into during the 16th century and drawbridge removed. The spring-fed castle, well built alongside the gate, survives and today is 91 foot or 28 meters deep. Inside the ward contained the chambers for the royal household, their immediate staffs and service facilities today. Historian Jeremy Asby considers them to be the best preserved suite of medieval private royal chambers in England and was designed by the royal palace in miniature. Haba-haba ng puti.
So this is it, guys. Another vlog from Conwy Castle, and I hope you enjoyed it. You've seen how beautiful the structure, you've seen how beautiful history, you've learned how beautiful history is, and I'll see you again soon, and thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos.